Rex 84 was so highly guarded that special metal security doors were placed on the 5th floor of the FEMA building in Washington, D.C. Even long-standing employees of the Civil Defense of the Federal Executive Department, possessing the highest possible security clearances, were not being allowed through the newly installed metal security doors. Only personnel wearing a special red Christian cross or crucifix lapel pin were allowed into the premises. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North was responsible for drawing up the emergency plan, which U.S. Attorney General William French Smith opposed vehemently. The plan called for the suspension of the Constitution, turning control of the government over to FEMA, appointment of military commanders to run state and local governments, and the declaration of martial law. The presidential executive orders to support such a plan were already in place. The plan also advocated the rounding up and transfer to assembly centers or relocation camps of at least 21 million Black Americans, in the event of massive rioting or disorder, not unlike the rounding up of the Jews in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. The second known time that FEMA stood by was in 1990 when Desert Storm was enacted. Prior to President Bush's invasion of Iraq, FEMA began to draft new legislation to increase its already formidable powers. One of the elements incorporated into the plan was to set up operations within any state or locality, without the prior permission of local or state authorities. Such prior permission has always been required in the past. Much of the mechanism being set into place was in anticipation of the economic collapse of the Western world. Remember, the war with Iraq was conceived as a demonstration of our powers, for the benefit of our enemies. The third scenario for FEMA came with the Los Angeles riots after the Rodney King brutality verdict. Had the rioting spread to other cities, FEMA would have been empowered to step in. As it was, major rioting only occurred in the Los Angeles area, thus preventing a pretext for a FEMA response. On July 5, 1987, the Miami Herald published reports on FEMA's new goals. The goal was to suspend the Constitution in the event of a national crisis, such as nuclear war, violent and widespread internal dissent, or national opposition to a U.S. military invasion abroad. Lieutenant Colonel North was the architect. National Security Directive No. 52, issued in August 1982, pertains to the use of National Guard troops to quell disturbances. FEMA has the power to turn the United States into a police state, in time of a real crisis or a manufactured crisis. The secret government virtually established the apparatus for dictatorship. Intelligence reports also indicate that FEMA has a folder with an additional 22 executive orders for the president to sign in case of an emergency. The most shining example of America to the world has been its peaceful transition of government from one administration to another. Despite crises of great magnitude, the United States has maintained its freedom and liberty. This nation now stands on the threshold of rule by non-elected people, asserting non-constitutional powers. Even Congress cannot review a martial law action until 6 months after it has been declared. For the first time in American history, the reins of government would not be transferred from one elected element to another, but the Constitution, itself, can be suspended. The scenarios established to trigger FEMA into action are generally found in society today: economic collapse, civil unrest, drug problems, terrorist attacks, and protests against American intervention in a foreign country. All these premises exist. It could only be a matter of time in which one of these triggers the entire emergency necessary to bring FEMA into action.